All right. So, in our last video, we talked about cellular respiration, this process of how cells take glucose and convert it into a ton of ATP. And that process, specifically the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain, those can't happen unless there's oxygen present, and quite a bit of oxygen in order to get the pyruvate into the mitochondria. So, what happens when the cell doesn't have that oxygen? Well, it has to do a process called fermentation. Fermentation is what your body starts doing when there's not enough oxygen to carry out the rest of cellular respiration. Fermentation is called an anaerobic process because it happens without oxygen. So, an here, this prefix meaning without or no, aero here meaning oxygen. So this is a no oxygen process. And its whole job is to keep glycolysis going. That's the whole purpose behind fermentation. It is a kind of subsistence level process just to try and get enough ATP made to keep the cell alive. And the way they do that is by keeping glycolysis going. So glycolysis is always going to be the first process here. And in humans, we do lactate fermentation, although you will often hear it referred to as lactic acid. And that is because science is an evolving process. We learn new things and we have a better understanding of things. And sometimes the names just get stuck. And lactic acid is what you'll probably hear it referred to a lot. But it's not making lactic acids, it's really making lactate. Okay, so we're here in the cytoplasm because that's where glycolysis takes place. And so we're going to go through glycolysis very much like we did before. We're breaking apart the glucose. Here's our pyruvate. Everything's looking pretty normal. But now, instead of the pyruvate going into the mitochondria, it's going to stay here in the cytoplasm, and it's going to get rearranged into two molecules of lactate. And when that happens, we're going to use this NADH that we made and make NAD+. And that NAD+ is going to circle back and be used as an electron acceptor here in glycolysis. This is how we're able to keep glycolysis going. We make this NAD+, this is the key, this is what we're after, to move back and be over here to use in this part of the process. As a nice little byproduct, we make two molecules of ATP, which is great because ATP is what the cell uses to do just about everything. So this is what the cell's trying to generate, but they need this in order to get that to happen. So this is what our cells do. Now, just so you have an understanding, oftentimes you'll hear people say that this is why cramps occur, that lactate is related to cramping. It's not. We'll talk more about that in class. But just so you understand, lactic acid or lactate, nothing to do with cramps. Okay. Lactic acid fermentation, or really lactate fermentation, is not the only type of fermentation that organisms can do. There's also alcoholic fermentation, and this is not done by humans. This is done by yeast and other single-celled organisms. And what happens is they carry out glycolysis, and then instead of, making lactate like we do, they make two molecules of alcohol, and they're 2 carbons apiece, and they make 2 carbon dioxide molecules. Still the same process. They're still trying to get NAD+. It's still going to circle back and keep glycolysis going, but the byproducts are different. That's really the main key difference there. But fermentation has been used for centuries. We use it to make all sorts of stuff. We make cheese and yogurt and bread. And yes, of course, we do make alcohol using it. But I mean, we use this to make all sorts of food products that are really beneficial to humans. Okay, so that is the end of our cellular respiration and fermentation discussion. So we've talked about how glucose is made in photosynthesis, and now we've talked about how organisms use that glucose to actually get energy the cell can use in the form of ATP. All right, that'll be it for this set of notes. And make sure that you kind of think about when fermentation happens, when cellular respiration happens, and how those are linked to photosynthesis.